Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out this morning. This morning I'd like to update you on an arrest that we made last Friday evening in reference to a death of a 23-month-old child. I'm going to give you an overview, and then I'll give you a timeline of the events as we know them today. Obviously, I always tell you this. Things may change. This is what we know as of today. So this is the best information that we have. On Tuesday, March 5th, at about 5:25 in the afternoon, Lakeland Police Department responded to a residence off of Kansas Avenue for a report of an unresponsive child. Officers arrived to find a 23-month-old that was not responsive and not breathing. The 23-month-old's name is Ezekiel Cotto with a C, C-O-T-T-O, St. Fleur, S-A-I-N-T-F-L-E-U-R, without a pulse and lying on the bathroom floor. Officers performed CPR on little Ezekiel until the fire department arrived and assumed the life-saving measures. Little Ezekiel was transported to the Lakeland Regional Health and then on to Tampa General Hospital with critical injuries. On March 8th at 5:03 in the afternoon, little Ezekiel succumbed to his injuries and was pronounced deceased at Tampa General Hospital. Here's the timeline that we know of a course of events that led up to little Ezekiel's death. The adult that was present with Ezekiel at the time was the defendant in this case, Bobby Curry Jr., age 20. Bobby lived at the residence with Ezekiel's mom, as I said, this was on Kansas Avenue. Mr. Curry, Bobby Curry Jr., is 20 years old. He's been charged with first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse. Curry was alone with Ezekiel, babysitting while the mother of the child was working. Curry and the mother and Ezekiel's mom have been in a relationship for approximately 4 months and have been living together for approximately 2 weeks. Curry is not Ezekiel's biological father. Curry's account to detectives on the night that we responded was that sometime between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m., he gave little Ezekiel a bath because he had urinated in his bed. While getting Ezekiel out of the bath, their puppy that they have in the duplex there leaped upon Ezekiel, causing Ezekiel to fall backwards, hitting the back of his head on the bathtub and then the floor mat on the floor. Just for reference, the puppy's about 15 to 20 pounds, and it is a puppy. Curry said Ezekiel tensed up after the fall, but was still breathing. He stated that he placed Ezekiel in his bed so that he could rest. He said at that time, Ezekiel was barely breathing, and he did not call 911. Curry said he returned about 3:13 in the afternoon to check on Ezekiel again, and at that time, he was not breathing at all. Curry put Ezekiel back onto the bathroom floor, which is tile, and gave him chest compressions and some air. He said Ezekiel then began taking breaths and was gasping. Still, Curry did not call 911. Curry messaged Ezekiel's mother, who was at work, at approximately 3:20 p.m., describing Ezekiel's severe physical difficulties and asking her in an Instagram message, is it possible for a child to go into cardiac arrest? Between 4:53 p.m. and 5:24 p.m., Curry and Ezekiel's mother messaged each other further. They continue exchanging Instagram messages, still not calling 911. Curry conveyed the grim details about Ezekiel's grave condition, and at 5:24, Ezekiel's mom told Curry, call 911, and he finally did. Between 2:55 p.m. and 5:25 p.m., that's about 2.5 hours, Curry and Ezekiel's mom exchanged 67 messages on Instagram. About 119 minutes, which is about 2 hours, elapsed from the first signs of distress until Curry finally decided to notify and call 911. As previously stated, Ezekiel succumbed to his injuries on March 8th at Tampa General Hospital. Keep in mind, this incident started on March 5th. Curry's account of how Ezekiel received his injuries were not consistent with the severity of the physical injuries that we observed. We spoke to the medical doctors that treated Ezekiel at Lakeland Regional Health and at Tampa General Hospital. They conferred with the state attorney's office, and the medical professionals estimated that Ezekiel was without oxygen for at least 45 minutes and suffered a brain bleed. The findings of the physicians, as well with the child protection team at Tampa General Hospital, were that the injuries to Ezekiel were consistent with physical abuse. On March 11th, the medical examiner performed Ezekiel's autopsy and found that Ezekiel's injuries to be inconsistent with the statement that Curry gave that the puppy knocked him over backwards. The injuries were not consistent with an injury or a fall, and the cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma, and the manner of death was determined by the medical examiner to be a homicide. After reviewing the findings of the medical professionals and in consultation with the state attorney's office, an arrest warrant was obtained for Curry on Friday, charging him with first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. Curry was arrested this past Friday, March 15th, at about 7:07 in the evening and was transported to the county jail. I'll tell you that the detectives have worked hard on the case. They've been involved from the very beginning. When we went out there, officers performed CPR on little Ezekiel at the time, but it is unconscionable and unfathomable to me that almost 2.5 hours could go by from the very first signs that Ezekiel was injured until Mr. Curry had finally decided to notify 911. So we were very concerned about that. We had to get some opinions of the medical professionals before we were able to push the charges through. We weren't sure if Ezekiel was going to make it or not, and then he died 3 days later. But we knew that he was in very, very grave condition. So it was a very traumatic injuries, and I can tell you that the accounts that have been related to me on the injuries that Ezekiel suffered were in no shape, way, or form consistent with the video that he walked us through and showed us how the injuries occurred. That did not happen. His fatal injuries occurred to the front of his head, and based on the way he said he fell, all of the injuries were on the back of his head. He did have some small bruising on the back of his head, but they were just bruises, nothing more. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
2 hours in between what you said was the first signs of distress in that 911 call. Is there ever an excuse waiting that long?
None. Zero. Absolutely none. There's absolutely no reason. I get he was probably overwhelmed. There was at least 2 puppies in the house. He's only 20 years old. I get all that. But common sense will tell you, and just being a human being will tell you, if another human's in distress, you pick the phone. If you don't know what to do, call 911. Instagram is not 911. Instagramming mom, she's at work. She can't help you. She can't perform CPR, right? She's at work. So you got to pick the phone up and call. It's common sense to me.
Chief, your department in the last week and a half has been dealing with some cases resulting in tragic, terrible deaths of very young children. How are you holding up? How are your officers?
Good question. You're correct. We've had a 3-year-old that was killed in a tragic shooting. Now we've got a 2-year-old, 23-month-old, almost 2, that's been the victim of a criminal act. It's tough on these guys and gals that do it. It's tough on the dispatchers. It's tough on the officers. It's tough on the detectives. You know, we ask these men and women to do things that normal human beings don't do, and see things that normal human beings don't see. You know, and they've got wives and families and kids too. So we're making sure that we're constantly monitoring them. We've got peer support folks that are with them, and we're trying to make sure we're doing everything that we can do to support them and support the families as well. You know, that's the other problem with the strategy is that, you know, you've got a three-year-old mom that lost a 3-year-old son, and now you've got a 2-year-old child that's dead, and he's got parents and grandparents as well. So good question. Thank you.
With Ezekiel's mom, is there any responsibility for her to have called 911 with those Instagram messages?
We're still looking into that. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any charges against the mother at this point?
We're still looking into that. We haven't charged her with anything right now, but we still have some further interviews and some investigating to do.
Is she cooperating?
She is.
How is she when you guys spoke with her?
She's upset, and she's cooperative. I'll leave it at that.
Were there any other children in the household?
There were not. There was Mr. Cotto, Ezekiel, I think 2 dogs and 2 ducks, I believe.
Do you believe he beat this child to death?
I believe that he was frustrated and he either used something or pushed the child, did something to the child that caused injuries to the front top portion to the extent that he had some fatal injuries to the top of his head. Whether he used an instrument, whether he took his face and pushed it into something, we just don't know.
Can you explain the first-degree murder charge? Just because we had another case where it was aggravated manslaughter of a child?
Right, right. That was the charge that we arrived at in consultation with the state attorney's office. A lot of times we do charge that as well, but we have charged first-degree murder on the child abuse cases as well on that. So, but that was the charges that the detectives in consultation with the state attorney's office agreed were the most appropriate on Friday afternoon.
Did he ever confess to anything?
He did a video walkthrough with us, which we will typically do. That was absolutely not consistent with the injuries that Ezekiel suffered. He, other than sticking to a story that he got out of the shower, he had given Ezekiel a bath because he had urinated on himself in the bed, cleaned him up, set him out on the floor, and that the dog came in and knocked him over, knocked him on backwards. That was the same story he told the 2 times that we interviewed him.
So with him wedding, with the child wedding the bed, could that have been the possible motive as far as what made the suspect upset?
Yeah, we're speculating at this point, and I would be speculating. I will tell you that I suspect that probably Mr. Cotto was overwhelmed. He probably was unused since he was only been there for 4 weeks, or probably was unused to babysitting a 23-month-old or almost 2-year-old. They can be a handful. I know I've got 2 grandsons that are a little like that, and so they can be a handful. And then probably with the stress of that, the stress of the dog, the 2 dogs, the 2 I think they were ducks that they kept in the house. I think they were. He was cleaning up after them as well. It's just conjecture, but I guess he just reached a breaking point. I don't know. He didn't tell us.
Was there any evidence of older injuries with the child?
No,
Does he have a criminal history?
he does not. All right.
Are there any tips or anything you can give to parents who may be in that situation where they're overwhelmed and they can call someone to do something before it reaches that breaking point?
Call somebody. You got to have a grandmother, a neighbor. Shoot, if you don't want to do, call us. We'll send. We can get you some resources. We can get you some help. Walk away, take a breath. There's all kind of coping mechanisms that you can use. But when you're 20 years old, maybe you don't realize that. You react with emotion. And it's sad for him. I don't want to, play that up too much. But I feel bad for him as well. He's got no criminal history, and I think he probably just overreacted and lost his temper. But that'll all come out in the trial later, and he had the opportunity to tell us. We provided that with him twice, and he was consistently staying with the story which we believe not to be true and not consistent with the injuries. I think it would have been better if he was honest with us, to be honest with you. I don't think he was honest with us. So, all right. I do want to continue, let you know that we are still looking for the 2 individuals that we spoke with on Friday. Can you turn it around? We still have the 2 individuals still outstanding. We still would like to find them. We are getting tips on Crime Stoppers, and we do want to get these guys off the street. So anything the public can do, continue to call us. We are getting tips, as I said, but continue to have the tips coming in.
What is this related to?
This is related to a shooting where the 3-year-old was shot in the backseat of the car last week that we spoke about last week at a couple press conferences. So they do have warrants for them, active warrants. We still do believe they are in the local area, Central Florida area. So if someone out there knows where they are, please give us a call. Do not hide them. You are committing a criminal act if you are helping them. Do not help them. All right? So appreciate that. Appreciate the public's help. Thank you guys for coming out this morning. Appreciate it.